What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackmine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they had a bit of a busy weekend as two of their biggest names made some massive headlines. We're going to dive into that, plus sneak preview into their week 6 matchup and a starting quarterback that one player is hinting at could be the starter. A big news day for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then one of their rivals, wide receivers, decided, I'm not signing an extension this offseason. Instead, I will head in with the franchise tag. What's it mean? And as always, we'll answer your questions. So I'm sure there's plenty of excitement as we are 1 week and a half away from training camp, a couple hours away from the pre-release of EA Sports College Football 2025, which I don't know what one I'm more excited for, but it's going to be a good week. It's a beautiful day here in the Berg. How you feeling, my friend?
Feeling really good. It was a fun weekend, not as busy as a weekend as you had. I kind of just sat back and relaxed a little bit. Got some things done, but I know you had a pretty busy weekend, so I'm not going to complain about the stuff I needed to get done this weekend.
Yeah, in the course of moving, so I'm slowly but surely moving. I had to help out with massive news that we'll dive into in a second for not one but two teams of coverage, on top of the Pittsburgh Pirates deciding that Andrew McCutchen was going to play after getting injured, and then beat the Chicago White Sox, get back to 500. Shout out the Buccos, the MLB draft, and just a little bit of here, a little bit of there as we approach the weekend. It was a good time. We will start with some terrible news, and we're not going to dive too heavily into it, but we just want to send our thoughts and condolences to Jacoby Jones's family, the former Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver and longtime rival for the Baltimore Ravens, a Super Bowl hero. Jacoby Jones passed away over the weekend, overnight, at just the age of 40, just a couple of days after his 40th birthday. Tragic news. Just reminds you once again to hold your loved ones, tell everybody that you love them, reach out to those that you haven't reached out to in a while, and make sure to spread some love. But our thoughts and prayers go out to Jacoby Jones, his family, his loved ones, the entire Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens organizations as they try to get through some tough times. We had plenty of other stuff happened throughout the weekend. We'll start with a Steelers rival who decided he's not signing an extension. Nothing's happening. He's going into the franchise tag, a day we've been waiting for as the Pittsburgh Steelers to find out what's going to happen. Let's dive into it. Let's dive into some news and notes.
Yeah, July 15th, big day on the NFL calendar, is the last day for franchise tag wide receivers or any franchise tag players to potentially sign an extension. It appears that T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals will not, which means he will hit the free agent market in 2025, but he does plan to play, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, on the franchise tag in 2024. So no extension, might potentially be the last year of T. Higgins in Cincinnati.
Yeah, a big day for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll say this. If there are a lot of people that are going to jump to the conclusion of this is an issue, this is a controversy waiting to happen, T. Higgins might not play. I expect him to play on the franchise tag. I expect him to be part of the Cincinnati Bengals this season. The only way I see him getting traded is if Joe Burrow goes down or the Cincinnati Bengals find themselves at 1-8 and they've lost some key pieces and the season's over, which essentially it's not over if Joe Burrow's on the field. So if Joe Burrow goes down, that's the only way they're going to get rid of him. They'd get rid of him right around week 8. Besides that, I don't see anything happening. I mean, unfortunate day for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, you don't care. You're very happy that T. Higgins is probably going to leave the AFC North. Let me ask this question. If he's available next offseason, which chances are he's going to be, what's the percentage you give the Pittsburgh Steelers to lock a guy like T. Higgins up? And do you think they'd have interest in him?
I think anybody would have interest in T. Higgins. I mean, a lot of people still doubt what T. Higgins can do, but just because Jamar Chase is there doesn't mean T. Higgins isn't a bona fide number one receiver. The dude is an absolute freak and impossible to cover one-on-one. So, yeah, I think 100% the Steelers would be interested. Whether or not they'd be actually able to get in the running, we've talked ad nauseum this offseason about, I don't know if the Steelers are really into paying wide receivers $30+ million a year. So around what it's going to cost to get T. Higgins next year in the open market. So I think I would give the chances of them getting him probably like 15%, simply because, as we've talked about with other situations, it is hard to pay a wide receiver that much money, especially when you have no idea what you're doing with the quarterback situation going into next offseason. So without that locked up, I'm not going to say they're going to go out and sign a $30 million receiver in Higgins.
Yeah, I look at T. Higgins as a guy that the Steelers probably will have interest in. I still remember T. Higgins' rookie season where I'm sitting in the press box going, this dude's going to be a menace. This dude, like I don't understand why people aren't talking more about how good T. Higgins is. And then you draft Jamar Chase, and it's almost like people forgot about him for a little while, and then he emerged back onto the scene. Oh, T. Higgins is phenomenal. Yeah, T. Higgins has been great. I don't know what he's going to go for. If he's less than $30 million a year, which I think is a possibility, I don't know how strong of a possibility that is, but if any of the big names, Brandon Ayuk, Cortland Sutton is definitely going to be under 30. A name like T. Higgins might be the dude who's sitting there at 26, 27, 28. I think that's a number the Pittsburgh Steelers might feel confident in for a guy like T. Higgins. I'm not going to say no, but I agree with you. I think that percentage is right there, somewhere around 20%, not much higher when it comes to the Steelers locking up a guy that they've been pretty familiar with for a long time. All right, what else we got?
We did get a good update about the Pittsburgh Steelers Week 6 matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders. Shout out to the wide receivers in this time of no news, making sure that we have something to talk about. Wide receiver Devontae Adams was on Fox Sports 1's Speak, talking about the Las Vegas Raiders quarterback battle, saying, quote, I think right now, if I had to say, I think Aiden O'Connell has the job because obviously he was here before, and that's the way that it was. He was running with the ones more until Gardner Minshew comes in and takes the job away from him. I think it's Aiden's job right now. He's doing what he's got to do to hold on to it.
I look at Aiden O'Connell as the best matchup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I feel very good about Aiden O'Connell. He's a 4th-round pick last year. He came in, he played all right. I think he had 12 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, something like that. He went 5-5 as their starter. I mean, not terrible, but certainly not good. It's like facing another Kenny Pickett. There were moments where he looked very scared in that pocket. I'm cool with it. Gardner Minshew is always going to have the Gardner Minshew effect where you just don't know if it's going to be a big game from the guy or if he's just going to do enough to win you a football game. He's got that winner mentality to him. I'm cool with Aiden O'Connell for the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 6 against the Raiders. I think that's the best matchup for him. I'm not overly concerned about the Raiders, no matter what, even with Antonio Pierce and Devontae Adams and everybody else, Max Crosby, and so on and so forth. I just look at them as a team who needs a quarterback, much like the Pittsburgh Steelers. And last season, there were a lot of teams who weren't very nervous about the Steelers because of Kenny Pickett. I don't think a lot of teams are going to be nervous about the Raiders this year because of either Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, but it's good to see Aiden O'Connell in the driver's seat there. Let's dive into some bigger news here, some Pittsburgh Steelers-oriented discussion. We'll start with TJ Watt and his latest odds to win Defensive Player of the Year. So currently on DraftKings, he is tied for first, co-front runners for the 2025 Defensive Player of the Year award with Dallas Cowboys linebacker Micah Parsons. And while everybody's like, oh, Micah Parsons is this and he's not that good and so on and so forth, there are two sides to the situation here. There's the good side for TJ Watt and there is the bad side for TJ Watt. What do we start with? We start with good or we start with bad?
Always start with good, and then we'll get through the bad afterwards.
All right. So the good is this. The good is that TJ Watt had to overcome Myles Garrett and at some point had to give the award to Myles Garrett. We all know this. We're all well aware that Myles Garrett winning the award last year was the NFL needed to finally give Myles Garrett a Defensive Player of the Year award. You couldn't lock him in as a generational talent. This guy's a freak in nature, hyping him up as much as the NFL hyped up Myles Garrett and then not give him a Defensive Player of the Year award. He was going to win it whether he sat on the bench all season or not. That's just what was going to happen. It was written in the stars. It was the easiest bet you could have made before the season. Myles Garrett was going to win it. The good news for TJ Watt is TJ Watt is TJ Watt. He's not going to go down. He's not going to go up. Myles Garrett has, I think, the 4th best odds to win the award this season, and that's because the NFL expects that he's just going to be Myles Garrett again, and he can't do that twice. You can't give him 2 back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards if he does not earn back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards. TJ is going to be TJ. He's going to be a guy who probably leads the league in sacks. He's going to be a guy who forces fumbles and interceptions and just has a ridiculous stat line. And yes, last year you needed an excuse to ignore it. So they brought up the pressure rate or the pressure win rate or whatever the made up stat was that the data guys were like, we're going to use this one to give Myles Garrett the award. The good thing is this. If you run through the stats, if you go TJ Watt versus Micah Parsons. Let me just break it down for you. In 2023, Parsons finished with 14 sacks, 64 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 33 quarterback hits, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, and 2 pass deflections. Yep, great guy. The TJ Watt, 19 sacks, 68 tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 36 quarterback hits, 8 pass deflections, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, an interception, and a game-winning touchdown against the Cleveland Browns. So clearly he wins the stat line. Micah Parsons is not Myles Garrett, and everybody wants to say he's the next guy, he's the next big legend. There are 2 sides to this that work in TJ Watt's favor. When it comes to just the publicity side, and the NFL is obviously a publicity stunt a lot of the times. Micah Parsons is not, he's not a quiet dude, so he talks a lot. Myles Garrett doesn't really talk that much. He does talk some, but Micah Parsons talks a lot. So he's not gonna be the guy that you have to give the award to, because there will be a lot of people who do not like that he talks so much and goes out there and rambles and so on and so forth. 2 is he is not a generational talent like Myles Garrett is supposed to be. And because of that, because he was, I believe, the 11th pick in the draft or something crazy like that, he's not the guy that Myles Garrett is, and he's not looked at in the NFL like Myles Garrett is. So as much as he is the next guy that's supposed to win, you're not just going to hand him an award. He's got to earn the award, which always works in TJ Watt's favor. The bad part of that is that if the Dallas Cowboys are good and real good, there is never a team that has more attention on them than the Dallas Cowboys. And because of that, Micah Parsons always gets an upper hand, because the Steelers, they could be fantastic. And hopefully Russell Wilson kind of raises that bar of TV coverage and people actually paying attention, instead of just Stephen A. Smith and so on and so forth rambling about nothing because they clearly didn't watch the game on Sunday. And they raise the bar, and TJ gets a little bit more TV coverage, a little bit more spotlight. And the Steelers aren't a team that everybody is just ignoring because they're the Pittsburgh Steelers and they're, boring. You love the Pittsburgh Steelers if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but if you're national media, you don't got much to talk about and you're not really paying attention. That's the difference, is if the Steelers do not get the national coverage that the Dallas Cowboys get, obviously eyes will be on Micah Parsons, and everybody and their mother is going to push the narrative of, is this Micah Parsons' year to be the best defender in the NFL? So TJ's got to overcome that. I don't think it's nearly the challenge that Myles Garrett is, but I do still think it's a challenge for TJ Watt. Your thoughts on Micah being the guy this year alongside TJ?
I mean, I understand it. Micah's been knocking on the door the last couple of seasons, maybe not to the level of some of these elite guys like Myles Garrett and TJ Watt, but he's still one of the elite defenders in the National Football League. And there's going to be a lot of people that want to see him succeed, especially because a lot of people want to see Dallas succeed because it's good for the league. It's good for revenue. It's good for all of that. But the one thing that I will say in TJ Watt's favor is, you mentioned, the national media attention. This season is lining up for him to get the most national media attention that he potentially could ever have in Pittsburgh. You're on Hard Knocks. You're playing on Christmas Day against the back-to-back defending champions, and the back half of your schedule is going to be a lot of games that have a lot of eyes on them. If he comes out and is consistent in the first half but goes off in the second half, that is going to 100% play into his favor.
Yeah, I agree. I don't disagree there. I think this is an opportunity. I think the NFL wants to get eyes on TJ Watt. You'll get the Hard Knocks. That's the thing, is TJ's not gonna earn any love in Hard Knocks. You know what I mean? He's a very quiet guy. He's not gonna talk much. He's not gonna say anything crazy. It's all gonna be mic'd up situations or something. Like, the cameras are gonna have to catch him saying something or doing something crazy, for everybody to fall in love with him, who isn't just a Steelers fan who's like, man, dude, I love how TJ Watt focuses on nothing but football and is just a terrifying human being, because that's exactly who he is. And all respect to that, because, man, TJ Watt, if you say hi to TJ Watt in the locker room, you're like a little bit intimidated just like walking by him. You know what I mean? That's who TJ is. I agree with you. I think this is a great opportunity for him. Does he have to lead the league in sacks? Because I guess that doesn't even count anymore. What's he have to do to in your eyes, guarantee a defensive player of the year?
I think the one thing you mentioned at the top of this was the Myles Garrett effect last year. I think if he leads the league in sacks again and still does everything else that TJ Watt typically does, which is flat out win games for the Steelers, like directly.
Yes.
You can always say, well, I mean, this player played a big role. No, he directly wins games for the Steelers. If he's able to do that this year, I think he'll be able to get it because, like I mentioned, and like you mentioned, the bar is a little bit lower this year because there's not as much of a narrative to give one guy the overwhelming majority of votes simply because he deserves to have one on his resume.
Yeah, I agree. You want to know a name on this list who sits third currently, who I think should be there with TJ Watt, is Max Crosby. And this is, we're talking a lot of Raiders here. I'll be very short with this, but it should be Max Crosby and TJ Watt for front runners for Defensive Player of the Year, because nobody has an impact like Max Crosby outside of TJ Watt. And that's just like, it's a fact. Go watch his tape. It's unreal. Sometimes I get bored and just watch Max Crosby highlights because I'm like, dang, this guy's impressive. And he doesn't get it. He's a bigger sleeper than TJ Watt just because he's a boring name, talks a lot of smack, but he plays for the Raiders and nobody cares. So big Max Crosby guy, bigger TJ Watt guy. So
I like Aiden Hutchinson this year to be a guy that jumps up there as well.
That could be a name. Which Aiden Hutchinson could be a scarier name to watch than Max Crosby and Micah Parsons, because if the Lions
everybody loves
good,
Detroit.
Everybody loves Detroit. That could be a tough one. All right, let's jump over to the offensive side of the football here. Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens just gets caught in the line of fire all the time. This time comes from a guy, a former Steelers executive, Bills GM, Doug Whaley, who, look, man, this guy loves to talk. And I don't understand. And I've heard Doug Whaley's a great dude. I've never met him personally, but I'm going to take everybody's word for it. I believe he's a great dude. When it comes to his football analysis and the things he puts out there, I cannot believe that he was in the running for the Steelers GM job, because I can't believe Art Rooney. I know for a fact Art Rooney reads and sees everything that we do. I know for a fact. I know his daily schedule starts with him riding a bike, the stationary bike, and flipping through everybody's stuff, because the PR team puts it all in one little document for him. Because the day I found that out was the day I was like, oh my gosh, what have I said that he no longer likes me for? Is this why he didn't say hi to me yesterday? Anxiety went right through the roof. So I know he's seeing this. I know he's paying attention. How he was a candidate blows my mind. This is what he on 93.7 The Fan yesterday or the other day about George Pickens and why George Pickens is not a number one wide receiver in the NFL. Quote, I look at it this way. If he is that impressionable, speaking on the Deontay Johnson trade to the Carolina Panthers, you already got your answer if he's the number one or not. Great players are focused on being great. They don't like anything outside or anyone else affecting them trying to achieve their goal of being the best. And if George Pickens is being that influenced and it affects him, then you know what type of player he is. He's not a number one. You don't pay him, and you know what you got. This is obviously in reference to the Steelers trading Deontay Johnson because of maturity issues and his influence on George Pickens and trying to keep the locker room together moving forward. And I was a big Deontay Johnson defender. I will remain a big Deontay Johnson defender on the field for the most part, but he had his issues off the field, man. He had his issues on the field as well when it came to trying sometimes, but I mean, the Mitch Trubisky situation, the freaking out after the Cleveland Browns situation, the Matt Canada situation, there was a lot of them. So if you're getting rid of him because you don't want that influence on George Pickens, my only issue with this comment, and I feel like it's a pretty significant issue, is that George Pickens is 21 years old, just turned 21 years old. I was a pretty influential guy. I was a pretty influenced guy at 21 years old. I don't know many people who are sitting around going, yeah, I was so mature that nobody could influence me at 21 years old. I'm not saying George Pickens was going to go out there and, uppercut Mitch Trubisky or Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. I'm not saying that he was going to lose his mind in the locker room after a game. I will say that he was very impressionable because, well, George Pickens has always had just a little bit of off the field issues, just a tiny bit. And yeah, he's got to work on them, but you have 2 more years to work on that stuff while it's on the field stuff that continues to impress. And to be totally honest with you, yeah, you want a guy who's mature 100%, and that does a lot in his paycheck. But when it comes to being a number one wide receiver, wide receivers are divas, and they've always been divas. And yeah, it, again, might affect the payday for George Pickens. it doesn't affect his status on the football field, because his status on the football field is he's a stud. He's unbelievable. If you're going to worry about the paycheck and the contract extension, have that conversation with them. Hey, man, yeah, we're going to give you a 4-year deal. We're going to backload it because we're worried in that first year that you're not going to take a step maturity wise. Or you're going to tell them, hey, you got 2 years to prove to us that you could take those steps maturity wise. You got time on that stuff. I'm not worried about that stuff. I'm not worried about that stuff in a rookie contract at all. I mean, Jordan Addison was arrested twice since his thing. I don't see anybody sitting around saying Jordan Addison can't be a star wide receiver. And I get it. Like, you don't want to get in trouble, but I think sometimes we're just talking just to talk. And George Pickens' issues are not that serious and stuff that the Steelers could work on. And Mike Tomlin is working on them. So when it comes to George Pickens being a number one, keep it on the field, man. Worry about the payday and how much you're going to give him and the maturity stuff after that. But for right now, keep it on the field, because George Pickens is a number one on the field. Agree? Disagree? What's your thoughts?
You took the words right out of my mouth whenever you said wide receivers are divas. I mean, that is the position we're talking about, correct? I mean, the most diva position in all of professional sports is wide receiver in the National Football League. This happens all the time. So just because he's, if you want to label him a diva, I don't think that it's really diva mentality. It's just kind of, like you mentioned, a 21-year-old being a 21-year-old. Then I'm not concerned about it at all, because especially not to the level of saying, well, because of that, he's not a number one wide receiver. How long has Stephon Diggs been a number one receiver? And there is potentially nobody more toxic in a locker room than Stephon Diggs. But on the field, you can't take anything away from him. So trying to do it it kind of seems like a vendetta. But I don't know the parties personally involved. I don't know Doug personally. I don't know George personally. So it sounds like a vendetta, but at the end of the day, on paper, it makes no sense.
Dude, people are trying to talk about, oh, you got to go get Brandon Ayuk. He's a number one receiver. He's a superstar. Brandon Ayuk's causing issues all over the place. Like, he hasn't stopped causing issues all offseason. I'm still pro go get Brandon Ayuk for the right price. I'm still pro Brandon Ayuk is a number one wide receiver. But I bet you that the same argument of George Pickens not being a number one wide receiver comes with you pay Brandon Ayuk a boatload of money. That doesn't add up to me. There are names all over the place that cause issues constantly. Antonio Brown, and again, I'm not trying to compare the talent or anything else of George Pickens and Antonio Brown. I'm simply just giving examples. Antonio Brown was the biggest head case in the NFL during his time in Pittsburgh. He probably would still compete for one if he came back to the NFL, a number one wide receiver, zero questions asked. He was never not a number one wide receiver, even when he was throwing furniture off balconies at grandparents and children, even when he was throwing Gatorade bottles on the sidelines. Like, George Pickens freaked out in a really bad offense with the worst offensive coordinator in football and had some issues because his offense sucked. Okay, yeah, no, that stinks. But again, there have been way worse examples, and I just think sometimes we're finding things to talk about. And I was a critic of George Pickens, a big one last season. I don't think I sit here with the same mentality when it comes to this, that he is not a number one, because he's done nothing to show that these maturity issues are a massive deal or can't be fixed. So we'll see what happens. And I've seen George Pickens in the locker room, and I tell you that, like, it's a little bit worse in the locker room than it is on the field or anywhere else. And I still think it's fixable. So that's where we stand with George Pickens. There'll be plenty more, but man, dude, some wild takes as we approach July. Thank God that football starts next Wednesday, because we are approaching bad times, bad places. Hopefully they get better. With that said, my bulletin board is out of material, or my sticky notes out of material here. Let's dive into some questions. For those of you who have questions, continue to toss them in the chat. We will answer all of them before we head out of here, as we do every single day. Appreciate you guys as always. What do we got?
Let's start with Joe Dilly, as we do every single episode. Why does every network think that Russell Wilson can't see the middle of the field? I remember him having a very good tight end in Seattle and not anywhere else. So I think Muth will reap the Russ rewards.
Yeah. I don't, I'm like concerned, because I agree. I think that Russ can throw over the middle of the field. It was more because, people want to say like, oh, he's short, and they want to use that as like the joke. And I mean, he's real short, 5'10", no chance, dude. I'm 5'8", and that guy looks up to me. So you could judge that as you will. You could use that as whatever type of example you'd like to use it for. when I look at Russell Wilson last year, the last 2 years, I look at it simply, he was trying to play hero ball. There was nobody in the middle of the field for him. Look at the Denver Broncos wide receivers core. Cortland Sutton is an outside guy. Tim Patrick was an outside guy. Lil Jordan Humphrey was an outside guy. Denzel Mims was an outside guy. Jerry Jeudy was an inside-outside type of guy, but he wasn't very good. And your tight end was okay, but he wasn't the greatest pass catcher. And to be honest, they ran him outside a lot. A lot of his routes went to the outside instead of the inside. I think that changes in Pittsburgh. He has about 7 slot guys that he's going to have to utilize on top of Pat Freiermuth. So I look at it and say this should be a better offense to utilize the middle of the field, but it does come down to him stopping the hero ball and stopping the looking for deep routes. He loves his deep balls, man, so he's going to keep throwing them. He's just got to be able to utilize his entire offense. I think he's a professional enough to work with Arthur Smith and kind of get that done.
Lifted Ones wants to know, what's it like growing up in Pittsburgh? I'm from Cali and always wondered.
That's a you question, my brother. I mean, I know you grew up like an hour 15-ish away, but I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, home of The Office, so I couldn't tell you. I was from afar, and it was cold up there. If I could tell you anything, it was cold. That's the biggest difference.
Yeah, I grew up in Johnstown, which is closer than Scranton, but again, same thing, cold, closer to Pittsburgh, which means road trips to Pittsburgh pretty frequently, which is nice. Just a lot of good food. That's all it was, and good sporting events as well. I mean, you could answer, what's it like going to college in Pittsburgh, because we both did that. But
yeah, it was
definitely living up.
It's a wind tunnel. Pittsburgh is downtown Pittsburgh. When you're there, is a wind tunnel. It's a great time. Sundays are dead unless you're on the North Shore. Don't go to downtown. There's nothing going on. And go to the Strip. And the great breakfast places. I said that the other day. I will continue to say that. Pittsburgh's got some phenomenal breakfast places. So if you ever get here, check them out.
Daniel wants to know, do you guys think that Cortland Sutton will cost a lot on the trade block, or cost more than other big-time receivers on the trade block this season?
No, I think it'll cost significantly less. If Brandon Ayuk's a first-round pick, maybe a second-round pick, Cortland Sutton's a third, maybe a fourth-round pick, and you're only going to pay him about $16 to $18 million a year. Phenomenal move. Best-case scenario for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But as of right now, they're not looking to trade him. And I don't think that window of opportunity opens until the end of training camp for Denver. So I would say best move. I'm not sure it's going to become available.
Let's move over to the next one with Jay's question, who says, what's an under the radar move the Steelers could make that could benefit the team while also being cost efficient?
I obviously the wide receiver is the big one, but we'll go somewhere else. We'll look at the corner, and I'll say that cost efficient. I mean, go get a Patrick Peterson, go get a Stephon Gilmore, go get one of those guys, because if you could get a top level, older, all pro, doesn't have to play every down, but could still make a pretty significant impact on the defense type of player to play cornerback and to fill that role and be super cheap, that's a great move. It clears up probably your last remaining need on defense. And you could find, I think, like 3 or 4 options right now that would be less than $5 million and have a pretty significant impact.
We got a good question here from Vibin with the Dog. Says, does Russell Wilson win comeback player of the year? Do you want the current odds according to DraftKings?
Yeah, if you got him.
I do. Aaron Rodgers right now at first at plus 125.
Obviously.
Then Joe Burrow at 210. Then Kirk Cousins at 500.
Yikes.
Then Anthony Richardson. Then Russell Wilson.
Oh, so top 5?
Top 5.
Top 5? All right. That's not terrible. I'm going to say pretty low. You know, if you're thinking, hey, I'm gonna toss $10 on here, see what happens, cool. I wouldn't do more than that. Just the names. Aaron Rodgers will be all over television. He will be on the Pat McAfee show every week. He will have the eyes glued to him. Joe Burrow will. Joe Burrow's 100% depends on if the Cincinnati Bengals are good or not, which is definitely hit or miss. And then Anthony Richardson could do it. Kirk Cousins, I don't think is likely to do it, but could do it depending on if the Falcons are good. Russell Wilson's got a long way. Like, he's going to have to, Russell Wilson's got to ball out. The Steelers have to be unbelievable, and he's got to be a massive part of that, but he's got the most working against him. So I would say low, slim to none. If you want to toss $5-10 on there, just to say, hey, here's a long shot. Let's see if we could buy dinner at the end of the season. Go for it.
Alex wants to know, if the Steelers want to be contenders late in the season, it starts up front with the O-line. We need to start Jones at left tackle, Troy at right tackle, and Zach at center from week 1 to build that chemistry. Do you agree with that?
I don't know about week 1. I think the Fautanu thing is, it comes down to if he's ready. Right now, I don't think he is ready. So we'll see what happens there. But I think that's the best case scenario for the Steelers. As of right now, Fautanu's got to prove that he could be a starting immediate left tackle or right tackle in the NFL. He didn't do that through OTAs and minicamp.
Let's move over to the next one here with Carl asking, keeping with the trends, have y'all thought of doing a Steelers trivia game show type of thing? Would be a cool thing for every once in a while.
That would be awesome. That would be hilarious. Actually, we should do something like that. I wish training camp wasn't next week, but also we have like a little bit of a break between the end of training camp, the beginning of the regular season. So maybe that's a good idea. That's a really, really good idea. We getting, Carl, toss it in here. We getting fans? We getting media members? We getting players? Who we doing here? What are we doing?
I mean, I feel like whoever you bring in would definitely be good on that one. Even if we do it with the chat here, the chat is always very, very interactive. So if we throw it in there, do the chat
True.
first to answer correctly, I think we could cook something up.
Yeah.
Let's move over to Jennifer's, who has another fun question here. Says, on a fun note, how many changes do you think Russell Wilson makes to his dorm in Latrobe?
That's a good one. I apologize that I got a little distracted there. I'm trying to, the joint practice just came out with the Buffalo Bills. Breaking news, August 15th. Big stuff for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's cool. Josh Allen will come to town unless we have to go to Buffalo. That would stink, man. I don't want to go to Buffalo ever again after being snowed in Buffalo for a week. All right. So how many changes is Russell Wilson making in that dorm room? I'll tell you this. I don't know, but here are some things to know about the St. Vincent College dorm rooms. There are only twin beds. So imagine Cam Hayward's, for Russell Wilson, it'll fit. Imagine Cam Hayward, Isaiah Loudermilk, George Pickens trying to sleep on a twin bed. Doesn't work that well. On top of that, there's no AC, so you're sweating your butt off. So you best believe there's an AC. I've seen people take massage chairs up there. I've seen people take full mattresses up there. I've seen some crazy, crazy stuff get brought up to the dorm rooms in Latrobe. It's a good time. I'm more excited for Russ just to see the dorm room. I want to talk to Russ after seeing the dorm room off the record, because on the record he's going to give you like a Russell Wilson answer. Off the record, I want to see his thoughts on the dorm room, because they're old school dorm rooms, man. They're old school, middle of nowhere, broke college dorm rooms.
Carl Mitchell wants to know, why is no one talking about Corey Trice as a slot corner possibility?
We talked a little bit last week about Corey Trice's slot corner possibility. We have to see Corey Trice play a training camp first before we could do anything else. That's the thing, is we try to temper expectations for guys who we don't know anything about yet. And that's Corey Trice's. He looked good in OTAs last season. He had a good starting week to training camp, but then he got hurt. He never got the pads on. You got to see what he looks like after a full training camp. We'll see in a couple of weeks what he looks like. For right now, it's a wait and see type of situation, but certainly a possibility. And I also think a reason that the Steelers might hold off on signing somebody.
Aiden Alexander says, what's up, boys? First time watching live from California. What do you both think about being aggressive on wide receivers and running backs and waiting around for a guy like Pat Freiermuth this year in fantasy football, thinking he could be a good choice?
I like this. So what's up? Appreciate you jumping on, Aiden, all the way out in Cali. Hope it's warm and sunny out there. Aggressive. I would be aggressive for wide receivers and running backs. Pat Freiermuth's always my sleeper for a tight end. The problem is that he's working in a Matt Canada offense with a quarterback who didn't like to throw over the middle of the field. So issues. I would say this year, the chances, the risk reward is bigger reward, less risk than in years past. Nothing's a guarantee, but if he's healthy, I think this is the year Pat has a bigger year. He's obviously doesn't have much competition because there is no true wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh. That could change, obviously, depending on when your draft is. I don't mind that. I don't mind that move. If you're thinking wide receivers and running backs are more valuable, which most times they are, especially with, it's hard to find 2 really, really sound running backs that aren't going to split carries most of the time and are going to stay healthy. So that's tough. I would agree with that. I think Muth is worth the risk this year in fantasy.
Luke Nessie wants to know, do you think playing the hard-hitting division games late could be a good thing? I think it could help us build momentum playing the easier part of our schedule early. Maybe half the teams will be out of contention.
So I think there's a good and bad side to this. The good side is, I agree, it does help build momentum. You've just played a very challenging schedule. You got guys that are ready to go, and everybody's fired up, and you got a really good roll going if you win those games. If you lose those games, obviously you have no momentum. You're crushed, and people have a really negative outlook heading into the postseason. The bad side of this is, I mean, tough schedule at the end of the season, and then you got to go into the playoffs, and it just never ends. How exhausted are guys? How beat up is your team? It's a lot of attrition versus momentum. What's going to be affected more? And I think it could be a good thing, but I also think there's a negative side to it.
Tyler mentioned it earlier, and you mentioned it earlier as well. Did you see Brooke Pryor reported that there's going to be joint practices with the Bills on August 15th? Obviously, we have, but this is interesting for the Steelers because this is a team that doesn't do it very often. We got Hard Knocks and joint practices in the same year from the Steelers. What's going on over there in the South Side?
So I don't know yet. I haven't gotten the report. I'm obviously on with you guys. I'll be off in a couple minutes and I'll get to check it out. But here's a name to watch. Chase Claypool comes back to town with the Buffalo Bills for the first time since leaving the Pittsburgh Steelers. That'll be a good time. It'll be a good time. There weren't many guys on this team, but I'll toss one out. I don't know who still remembers this, but the best practice I was ever at, and I'm not, I wasn't pro Minka, pro Chase Claypool in this fight at all. But the best practice I was ever at was standing up on the balcony watching Minka Fitzpatrick and Chase Claypool just go off on each other, hands swinging, dreads being pulled, people crowding around. It was a great time, just because it was real. Fights at football practice always bring the energy up. But yeah, I'm excited for Chase to come back to town.
Vondell Lewis says, "Are we going to be able to get off the field on third down this year?"
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I think the chances are better. Strong running game sets you up a little bit better. That's the thing, is last year the offense was so predictable that you set yourself up at third and long constantly. If you're going to run the football this year and you set yourself up on 3rd and 2s more times than not, great. You'll more than likely be okay. So I have a feeling that things will be better.
Let's go to the next question here. It says, on the running back 3 front, could we have lightning strike twice? UDFA Dajon Edwards, with his college pedigree, physical measurables, etc., looks like he could shake out to be a Jaylen Warren type runner. What do you think of Edwards out of Georgia? Yeah,
Edwards is the name to watch at training camp when it comes to those sleeper running backs. I mean, you got to see more from them. Last year, or even when Jaylen Warren was coming out, like you knew Jaylen had a little bit of a spark, but you didn't see it all until you got to Latrobe. That's what we're going to see in Dajon Edwards. Is that spark going to continue to grow? Is it going to explode into something? Can he make a name for himself? The Steelers have no reason to keep only 3 running backs this season. They could keep 4 if they think somebody's there, because they don't have to keep a ton of wide receivers. There's just no need for a ton of wide receivers when you don't have the talent competing for the position. So I would say he's the name to watch, but it's early. It's early.
Romo wants to know, or Ramo, excuse me, thinking of Tony Romo, any chance of an all Steelers talk fantasy league this year?
That would be awesome. You just started the conversation, so we'll continue to have it. I will say that I'm awful at fantasy football. Like, people ask me for fantasy football advice, and I always give them a warning at the beginning that I play fantasy football every year. It is my favorite thing in the world. I am awful at it. Like, atrocious. Me, my 2 brothers, and my dad are all in the same league. It's with a couple of my buddies. It's a 12-man league. We've had it since I'm 10 years old. We've had this league. It is wild. And every single person in this league has won the championship in 14 years outside of me. So take that as you will, because I'm not good.
Neither am I. I retired from fantasy football a couple of years ago, actually. But this might get me back out of retirement. Everybody'd kick the crap out of me again. But hey, it'd still be a little bit of fun to do with the.
I was going to say, we might have to pull you. We might have to pull you out of retirement.
Might have to do it. Might have to do the old Brett Favre a couple times, or the Tom Brady, I guess, is the more updated reference there. But let's move over to this question here. It says, anything about Calvin Austin? Is he too small to become a wide receiver too?
Now, Calvin Austin plays much bigger than he is, and I think he's outside, inside capable when it comes to being a wide receiver. Wide receiver 2, I think he's a sleeper for the position. The problem is like, how are they going to utilize him? We don't know yet. Is he going to be a gadget guy? Is he going to be more of an inside guy? Is he going to be a little bit of everything? We'll see what happens. I do think there's a shot that at the end of the season, he's the second leading receiver on the Steelers if they don't make changes. I think Calvin Austin's got a bunch of upside. Last year was a bad year with his first year really in the league and his first year playing. But again, the offense, the quarterback play, the way that they used him, Allen Robinson being here, I think this is the year we get to see Calvin Austin. So I think the upside's certainly there.
We got another question here about Calvin Austin. Says, Latrobe, home of the Rolling Rock Pony Bottle. Who do you feel will prove to be the small but mighty showout in Latrobe? He's feeling Calvin Austin. Do you have another name for anybody?
Yeah, Calvin Austin is a really good one. Ooh, a showout in Latrobe this year. That's so tough. That's so tough. On offense, see, like the Pickens are so slim. It's so bad. Scotty Miller's a name to watch. He looked impressive during OTAs and minicamp. I hope Van Jefferson does something, but I'm not really totally sold on that. I think on defense, you're looking at a guy like Darius Rush, who could be a dude who shows out and has a good camp and kind of makes some noise. Offensively, Calvin Austin, he might be your best bet as a sleeper to watch.
Mike Naple has the important questions here. Says, did you buy NCAA and which team are you excited to play as?
Yeah, I mean, I bought NCAA the second I could buy NCAA. 2:00 can't come fast enough. We're getting there. It's my life's over after 2:00. The Wi-Fi guy shows up at the new house at about 11, and which I think he actually just called me. So hopefully he's not there now. 11, and from there, I don't think I exist. I just hope nothing happens. The MLB draft is this afternoon, so that's unfortunate. But besides that, it'll just be college football. What team am I excited to play for? I don't really have like a team that I'm excited to play for. I want to see, Arch Manning obviously is the guy that I want to test out a little bit. But I'm a take Rhode Island to the college football playoff type of guy. Like we're going to recruit for a couple of years and build a dynasty with nobodies type of player.
We got another NCAA question from somebody I think you might know. Says,
Our
Noah,
boy.
are you going to stream college football 2025 for us later today? Do we get a little bit of extra content on All Steelers Talk today? That's from Steelers_DB, who, again, very familiar tag there.
Yeah, very familiar name, Derek. Hope you're doing well, brother. For you guys who do not follow Derek or subscribe on YouTube, this is his channel, so please go hit that subscribe button right now. Am I gonna stream later today? I don't know, dude. You get in the game? Are we streaming together? I don't know if you're a video games guy. So if you're down, I'm down. Let's make it happen. It'd have to be later tonight because I'm gonna have to like drown myself in the game for a couple hours, and then when I emerge from the coma, I will be like, all right, now I'm ready to speak words and actually talk to people again. So you let me know.
We got a couple more questions here. Let's go to Luke Nessie, who says, if the new running back and defensive line help pans out, does that spell the end for guys like Najee and Cam?
I think maybe. I think the end is near for Najee no matter what. I don't think he's getting another contract with the Steelers. Cam is less certain, but I still think it's a 50-50 shot whether he gets an extension or not. That might fall more on Cam than it does anybody else. We'll see what happens. I think the defensive line, there's not really an emergence to be had. Keanu Benton's already there. Isaiah Loudermilk's on the last year of his deal. I don't see DeMarvin Leal being a guy that makes a massive impact and grows into this, has to be a starter player. And Logan Lee is a mid to late round pick who you got to develop. So Cam comes down more to money and the situation there. I think Najee's gone either way. You can find a running back. You're not going to pay him.
This might be the hardest question that anybody has ever asked you, but Pittsburgh Hornets wants to know, how do you fix the Pro Bowl?
I don't know.
Can you? I guess can you is the first question we got to ask.
Joe Burrow's thing the other day where, you put it in the middle of the field or you put it in the middle of the schedule. I'm not a fan of. I don't think it helps anybody. I don't think guys are going to be into it. I think at first guys will be like, oh yeah, it's a little break, 7-on-7, blah, blah, blah. First person to sprain an ankle, that's the end of it. So I don't think you could put it in the middle of the field. Or the middle of the season. It's too physical of a sport, even if you were playing flag football. I don't think I've said this before. I'm going to say it. I don't think it could be fixed. I don't think you could fix the Pro Bowl. I think it's a lost cause, unfortunately. You have to protect guys. Guys are going to protect themselves. And Sean Taylor running up and smoking a punter, it's just never going to happen again, because you're just not going to want that if you're a player getting ready for next season or whatever. It's not going to happen. So I don't think it's fixable, unfortunately. But again, that's a narrow mindset. If somebody has a better example of how they would fix it, I would love to hear it.
That's a wrap on questions for today.
Also, big eye emoji. I'll hit you up. All right. With that said, we're going to head out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. I mean, who knows? Me and Derek might be back on live streaming later this afternoon, so I'll keep you posted. With that said, enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.